engage with our iPhones and help them support make digital transactions with Apple. Most recently, I left Apple 3 weeks ago, I think, to somehow come here, back to Dominican Republic, and start a company called Moneda, and that's kind of where we are today. Also, in addition to Moneda, we've been doing, even though we founded the company this year, we've been doing research for a year and a half. A lot of people usually just kind of go write some code and try to build something. We came here during COVID. Me and my team will fly from the United States, and we will work with people like Cowdy and some of the people who were leading the industry when it comes to technology and UX. And we would try to learn from them about their background, their work here in Dominican Republic, but ultimately, we try to understand our users, like why did this problem existed? And so we took a year and a half of research. And then we took some time to tell people what we found. And so we partnered with Univid and some other conferences to share people, after spending a year in the Dominican Republic, here's what we found about some of the issues that we think exist. And we think we have a solution. And I don't think we're ready to share with you what that solution is. You have to wait, but I'll share some of the stuff. And then in addition to that, I do consulting work. So I also specialize in generative AI or generative artificial intelligence. So doing some great stuff in Latin America with different governments to try to bridge the gap, the technological gap between Latinos and technology using generative AI. And I'll share a little bit more about that in the future. So who are we? So at Moneda, we have two core, we have a vision, and the vision is to build a world of equal financial opportunities. We fundamentally believe that in order for you to have equal opportunities, especially in this world of technology and internet, where you can monetize from content creation, coding, or marketing, social media marketing, you need to have the infrastructure to be able to monetize from those platforms. Those who don't have access to a traditional bank account are outside of the scope of that monetization. So therefore, you cannot make enough money or the same amount of money. But there's another problem, right? Because we think about some of these people are technical and they go to school and they can get these great jobs. But what about the people that don't go to school or don't have access to school? What is left for them? And what happened during COVID when the world shuts down, right? They then become possibly Uber drivers and pedidos ya and other great stuff in Airbnb. And these gig economy platforms are great for emerging markets like Dominican Republic because anybody can do it. You don't need a degree. Anybody can be an Uber driver. In fact, you only need 2 wheels to drive a pasola and get some delivery, right? But the problem is that Uber and some of these gig economy platforms come from America, Silicon Valley, and they all, you can do it, but you need a bank to receive your payments. So if you don't have a bank account, then you cannot do Uber, and that's kind of messed up. And so for us, we thought that that was crazy, right? Because we thought that this is a great technology that can help this country move forward with the upcoming class. But if they don't have a bank account, how can they make money? And so we thought that we can solve this problem one way, and we keep researching to see what's the best way to do that. And so we want to create equal financial opportunity. We just want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to make money, no matter who they are. And so that's our vision. That's like what we want to do in the long term. But what we want to do right now is to build an infrastructure for the people that never had a bank account in their lives. And you'd think that that might be not too difficult, but it is, because most of us are familiar with the term like deposits. Some of us are familiar with the term like transactions or history. Most of these people that never had a bank account before don't even know what the word deposit is. And trust me, we did another presentation where we exposed it to the world. Like, we went to these neighborhoods and we gave people apps and we named this button deposit so that they can click it and they can get their money inside of the app. And like 95% of all users failed our usability test because we named the button deposit and they didn't even know what that was. And we had to look back at the interviews and try to figure out, wait, why is our usability test failing? We spent a whole year building and designing this app. How come users are not getting through? And we find out that it's because none of them knew what the word deposit was. So they were second guessing every time they clicked the button. So this is a very interesting word, right? And so think about now, you have the billetes of the world and the Quick and all these great mobile platforms that they promote financial inclusion, but their buttons are named like deposits. And so sometimes they ask, well, how come they don't have great user acquisition? And that is because they're building an app for people that never had bank account with the mindset of people who had bank accounts. And that's something that that's what we like to figure out and solve. And so that's Moneda, that was our vision, and that's kind of like our mission. We have 4 core values, and everybody in my company, we are equal, but they're great people. I believe that they have great backgrounds. But I force them to think about 4 core values. The first one is simplicity. Technology is fundamentally complex, very complex. And while most of us out here are very used to it and understand it, the reality is that there's people that never had a bank account. You know what? It's the first time they just had a smartphone. And the only thing they know how to do, and trust me, we test it, is open WhatsApp, hit the mic, and say, "Aló, mándame esto." And then you respond back in text, and the response from them is, again, another voice note. And we ran that test too, and we were like, oh, maybe they just like sending voice notes. And we realized that that's not the case, that they just didn't know how to write. Right? And so simplicity is important. So what we say we're a core value, we say simplicity. We like to develop culturally and relevant experiences that feel like they already have done it before, that remove the complexity behind the technology so that our users can have a more comprehensive experience. So that's our core value, simplicity. Then we also have perceptibility. It's a big word, I know, it's a big word. Even in English, we usually don't use this word like this. And so perceptibility, simplicity is what we do, what we deliver, what we give to the user. Perceptibility is how the user receives it. Now, the problem is that the way the user perceives it depends on their abilities. Somebody who's blind might perceive color of a picture differently. If you're colorblind, you might perceive an image very differently than somebody who's not colorblind. And so what we say is that it is our responsibility to create enough support about our infrastructure so that every user receives the same value of our platform independent of their hearing, sight, touch, or cognitive ability. Big buzzword for saying that we care that our users can use our app. The other stuff, we call it inclusion innovation. And what that means is that we don't discriminate. You can be gay, you can be dark, you could be illegal, you could be Muslim. We don't really care where you come from. We don't care what you look like. We have to ensure that our platform does not discriminate against your personal identifier. Tough to do in a place like the Dominican Republic because it's very diverse and colonialism, right? But we believe that if the people building technology bring in these biases, the technology itself will be biased. I'll give you an example. When I worked at Apple and we were building Face ID from your iPhone, at first we test our product internally, and Face ID only worked if you're white. Funny, I swear to you this is for real. Like if you were black and like curly hair and you try to open the phone, it would not work. And so at Apple we have these special like diversity groups, and I was one of the leaders in the Latino version of that group, right? And one of the things that we do is that we reach out to these diversity groups like, hey, can you help us come train these machine learning models, right? Machine learning models, they learn based on data. And so if the people who are developing the app, they're white, then yeah, the feature will mostly be white favor. And so believe it or not, there's not a lot of people that look like me that worked at Apple. And so like I was part of like 2% of Latino males who were in an engineering team at Apple. And I was the only Latino in my team of like 100 engineers. Crazy shit, right? And so it's important for us that our innovation is inclusive. So we ourselves had to be inclusive. So my team, I think we've done a good job in bringing like both female, men, people from different parts of the world, not just Dominican Republic. And so I'm very, 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 very strong about that. Lastly, equity in innovation. This is also kind of like a new word here. I try to use it and kind of tell people about it, and some people don't always get it. But what equity means is that I was born in Los Mina. But I do have today some friends that were born in Piantini and some of the other great neighborhoods, right? The reality is that the person from Los Mina does not have the same opportunities as the person in Piantini. And so we believe that as a company, it is our responsibility and it is our job for those people from Los Minas to be able to lift them up to the same standards as the people from Piantini. And so our app is designed to make sure that everybody is met at face value. So that takes care of kind of like that core value stuff. And so this is the who are we? What do we do? What do we do? We do accessibility, right? We do accessibility behind fintech. So we're trying to help the fintech market in the Dominican Republic and Latin America. And accessibility, by word of Apple, not mine, they say making technology usable for everyone. That is what accessibility is. It's not to think about disability people, because the reality is that we're not disabled. We just have different abilities. Change your mindset, right? So nobody is disabled. We just interact with the world differently. And so the dictionary definition is the quality of being easily reached, entered, or used by people who have disability. And so at Apple, we really don't like using the word disability. Now, on the mobile side, we do that on mobile because we believe that this is the mobile-first market. People here kind of like skip computers and went straight to phones. It was just cheaper and easier, right? And that's kind of like the rest of the world is doing. India, Africa kind of do the same thing. And lastly, emerging market. This is where we are, right? This is an emerging market. And what that means, some people might think is a negative thing. It's actually a very good thing, because that means there's a lot of opportunities coming to all of us, especially people in these kind of conferences, right? You'd be crazy to know how many opportunities we have with like the introduction of large language model and how we can build a lot of pretty cool stuff here. But emerging market means that people might not have the best iPhone. They might have the iPhone that's like 6 years old, right? It means that their display is like very, very low resolution. It means that they might have mostly Android, right? It means that their internet, el paquetico, very expensive and very limited. And so we had to figure out a way of like, when we navigate this idea of emerging market, we had to figure out that when we design things, we don't design for the greatest and latest. We actually, our designers, they're trained and coached to take the least, smallest, most least functional iPhone and design for that. And then everything else should scale to all the other better products, but we try to design for the smallest, least possible product possible. Actually, I have an iPhone and have an Android too, and I use them both because in order for me to understand the users, I kind of got to get both of the experience. Accessibility works very differently in both of them. Like if you actually use Instagram, you'll be noticed that the way you navigate through stories, very different on Android than it is on iPhone. Therefore, if you know that most of your users are on Android, maybe try to build gestures that are more resembling the Android experience. Otherwise, the user is just going to get so confused. Like, I remember when I started doing this, I was trying to move through the stories, and you will swipe right on iPhone to skip to the next person, but then on Android, it does something completely different. So important that you do that. So that's kind of what we do. And another thing that we do is that we actually, I'm working with Google and Intelisys and the president of El Salvador, Bukele, to work on a very interesting platform with generative AI. We're building the first medical AI assistant for the entire country of El Salvador. And what we're trying to do is that if it would live pretty much in everybody's phone, and if somebody feels sick, they could just pull their phone out and tell their phone that they feel sick, and then our AI will literally ask them questions. It performs a triage, the protocol, and very conversational. It will remove the interfaces and the button, and it will make it just conversational, like they're talking to a real doctor. And then we would then run some algorithms to then push them to the emergency room based on the urgency of that. And then when they go to the clinic, the doctors are able to actually ask the AI about the patient, and then the AI would give the doctor the protocol to execute for diagnosis. Why this is very impactful? One, it's actually the first project of a kind in the world, because HIPAA in America don't allow us to do this, and Bukele has enough power to kind of change regulation for us to do that. So we're working with like 200 doctors in El Salvador, and the goal is that if we're successful, December 15, we're going to push this system to the Dominican Republic. And the idea is that every doctor, every person, every patient gets the same standard quality of medical care. So that's kind of what we do too, on the side, interestingly enough. Now, why we do it, and this is kind of like what the talk really is today. Why we do it is because 15% of the entire world population experience one form of disability. That is 1 billion people. Now, if you're the Facebook of the world, if you're the Apple of the world, right, and you want to build an app that is just magical, we all dream to build the next big thing. Imagine if you can get 1 billion people to use your app. That would be pretty wild. So statistically, on a more regional level, 1 in 7 people have a disability. So if in this room there's, I don't know how many people are in this room, but think about this, right? If you have 10 users or 7 users, 1 of them has some kind of disability. And that could be really impactful for your apps. 8% of all men are colorblind. Not the same statistics for women. So 1 in 12 men are colorblind, only 1 in 200 women are colorblind. So you might be like, how is this even relevant, right? Because it's like, well, it depends, right? Who has the biggest purchasing power, man or woman? Statistically speaking. And I'm sorry, like, I get it. For some reason, we messed up and we gave more employment opportunity to men. And that is a problem. But besides that, which I hope that we can fix, who has a bigger purchasing power? Men, right? It's just how society evolved. And so if your app, if you're designing the Quick or the Billet or the Banreserva or any financial app, if you're designing it where the majority of your users are men who are intended to spend, and you make a button green, and he's colorblind, then he might not be able to use that button, and then you lose a lot of money. And so, like, these are the things why we really care about. And so you might be like, well, what, why do we care about men being colorblind? Well, in a fintech, they're the purchasing power, so you might want to care about that. And lastly, Dominican Republic has one of the best smartphone penetration in the entire Latin America. In Latin America, it's about 62% smartphone penetration. The Dominican Republic has a 78%, which is pretty wild. So why we started this in the Dominican Republic was because we realized that though we have the same side effects to Latin America, as far as like the inclusion and the stuff, we have the best technological access. So we should all be proud of that, right? So mobile here is very popular. Take advantage of that. Very important. Take very advantage of that. So accessibility, there's 3 kinds of accessibility: permanent, temporary, and situational accessibility or disability. And that means permanent. That means that you lost a leg. Sorry, you cannot grow it back. Temporary means that you got an ear infection and you cannot listen to Netflix anymore, so you put the subtitle. But eventually that ear infection is going to come back and you will be back to 100%. And then situational is like sometimes you want to listen to music, but you are in the subway, in the train, el tren de aquí, too loud, right? And so you want to add some title. So that's situational. And this happens everywhere. And here's a different kind of senses and how they could be impacted by any of these 3 categories. So it's important that you think about this when you build mobile accessible experiences. That some people, sometimes a feature is not even there because it's always meant to be used, but just in case your users, like imagine if somehow you want to pay something and then you went blind because somebody put dirt, but you got to pay this because if not, you're going to lose your ticket to like Juanli's Guerra or something, right? So you want to be able to like use your app at that case. So here's an advice. There's 2 most popular assistive technology in mobile. One of them is called voiceover, and the other one is called dynamic type. They're the most popular technology. Voiceover cater to blind people, so the device speaks the interface to them. Then dynamic type caters not to blind people, but people in the spectrum, because you can change the size, right? We all use glasses, so it's important. It's important that it's not binary, right? It's not black or blue, or it's actually an entire range. Some people can be one part of the range, some people can be in the other. I know sometimes most of us think that things are just yes or no, binary like code, but they're not. It's actually a spectrum, and you gotta take that into consideration. So far, so good? Have I lost anybody? Okay, good, yeah, awesome. So here's how you can help yourself build great experiences. I call these the the 5 purpose question, I don't even know, what do I call it? 5 essential questions you can ask yourself about your experience. And I do this all the time, and I'll show you some tricks when I'm writing code. It's been a while since I wrote some code. But the first question, do I serve a purpose? So look at your UI element and ask yourself, do I serve a purpose? And you kind of figure out what's the alternative. Well, the alternative is decorative. It's supposed to be there for decoration, right? And so if it's there for decoration, maybe you don't need the accessibility, right? Maybe we don't need to access it. And so this is a quick kind of yes or no question, and this helps you determine whether the element that you're considering should be made accessible, yes or no. If it serves a purpose, if it's part of the functionality of your app, it should probably be accessible. And then, what is my name? That's some crazy stuff. Like what do you mean? What's the name of a button? What's the name of a icon? But you see some example, and it's really bad. So what's my name, right? Does this element has a name? Should it have one? Does the name we gave it intuitive enough within context? So one thing is like for people who can see, you might label a button sand, right? And because they're getting the context of the rest of the screen, it makes sense what sand means. But if somebody who's blind, they don't get to see the whole screen. They only get to see one percentage. And so like if they're scrolling and the button is all the way at the bottom, then they come across this button that says send, and they're like, wait, what am I sending? So you might want to say send money. We all like money, right? Send money. We're sending money. That's important. You can also put a hint, which is like, if you press this button, you're going to send money. You're not sending a message, so be careful, right? You don't want to lose all your money. And so the other one is, what is my personality? Super crazy, but buttons and UI and elements have personality. They can be buttons, they can be labels, they can be icons, they can be headers, they can be a selective state, selected, not selected, unavailable. These things are important. We know when we're filling out a form, we know if a button, we can click it because it's actually graded out. Somebody who's blind doesn't usually see the color, so you gotta let them know somehow that that button is not available. Otherwise, they'll come across the button and they're just gonna keep pressing, and nothing happens. And then they get upset, like, why the app is not working? It's because you forgot to tell the user that the button is unavailable. So keep that in mind. What is my value? My biggest pet peeve, and I hate it all the time. Sometimes we have like steppers or bars, and most frameworks, they use the percentage, right? Because it's 0 to 100, but sometimes they represent numerical values. And so when you use your app, it works great with your finger, but when you put accessibility, it says 5%, 3%. And you're like, oh, wait, 5% of my money? Like, what does that even mean, right? Or 5% of like basketball, right? And so sometimes given the direct value of the input or controller is important here. And lastly, where am I? It's important, and I'll show you why the where am I is very important, the apps that don't get that right. Do I serve a purpose? Easy way to fix it. Most frameworks have an attribute called is accessibility element. And the way to fix it is simply by saying true. It's not default for this to be true. It is your job to code. There's one line of code to fix that problem. Put it in your code. Otherwise, it won't be. And you'll see the example today. What is my name? Every UI element has one attribute called accessibility label. Put it. Use it. Why? Because sometimes you assume that it's going to inherit the label from the system. But the reality is that that label, it is not localized. And so you'll see that sometimes you use that label, and like I'm using my app in Spanish. Meanwhile, it's crazy. There's an app here in this country that is financial app. When I put it in Spanish, and the app seems to look in Spanish, but when I'm navigating through it, it's talking to me in English. Honestly, that's some pretty crazy stuff, right? One line of code, fix it, like add it, don't forget it, right? And make sure it's localized so that if you have foreigners that come to the Dominican Republic, right, is the country with the biggest tourism in Latin America. Most people that come here don't speak Spanish. If you want them to use your app while they're here, localize your label, right? Important. Um, what is my personality? Again, who are you? What are you supposed to do, right? Again, another attribute, accessibility trait. This trait can be a button, can be a filter, can be an input field, right? This tells the user how is the affordance and signifiers of the UI for disabled people. It tells the people how this button is meant to behave and how to use it. And I don't know if you noticed, but most of this stuff is like one line of code. And I just don't know why people don't do it. Like, it's either being lazy or they just don't care, right? But it's like literally one line of code. And then what is my value, right? Again, if you have a stepper or something, you store the value of that stepper somewhere else. What you do in the UI element is that you pass the UI element a value that is binding to that stepper. So that when the user looks at the stepper, if they press plus, it announces the value that it got added to that element. And lastly, where am I? This has to do with framing in the field. Every phone has a frame. Accessibility elements are not just floating in space. So users navigate screen reader, left, bottom, right, and they navigate one element at a time. It's important that you input the frame location so that users know when within the frame they are. Here's one of the most annoying example that I can share today. I will skip through the code because we're running low on time. We also started a little late. Abbreviation. Most apps don't tell you, like, especially apps that use like notifications, it's like 2 minutes ago, 1 hour ago, 3 hours ago. Sometimes we use these abbreviation for seconds and emps. When you put accessibility, here's what your phone sounds like. $2 ago. I swear to you, like, to you who's using the app, it makes total sense, right? You'd be like, oh, 2 seconds ago, or 1 hour. And if you put the hour, it would be like, Piero, comment on your post ago. Yeah, what does that even mean, right? And so this gets a little more complicated, which is why I hate it, because you got to put more effort into it. So you got to get a formatter. For those of you guys who can code, you got to get a formatter and then work through the formatter to massage the label and then re-inject the label into the accessibility label of that S. And then once the accessibility comes over and it reads it as second, even though visually it's just SNS. So it's a little more work to do that one, but I like to show this because, again, it's one of the ones that I really hate the most because notifications are really important, right? If the bank hits you up saying, yo, somebody just removed $1,000 from you right now, like, you might, if you don't know that that was you, then you might want to like get to it. This one is important too. I'm sorry if anybody works for any of the companies I'm kind of like speaking today about. You guys know BJet or BJet? All right, you guys know Quick? All right. Great platforms, kind of, right? They're doing better than anybody else have done before, so they're improving, so I love that. They're quite not there yet, and I want to work with them to help them. We really do. We're not competitors to banks. We're actually pre-banking, so we like to work with them. But they're also trying to be cool, and cool is great, right? Quick, name cool, but like I actually ask a lot of people if they know the app, and they usually say something else that is not Quick, right? They'd be like Keek or like literally every other name, but the name that the company says that's the name of the app. And so like branding is important. And so like people, get your users. If you want users to tell somebody else about your app, help them understand the name of your app. I tell you right now, when you use accessibility to go over the name of these apps, it does not say Quick or BJet. It says some other shit. And I like to make fun of it because it's true. Like branding is important. Like imagine if we were building this Apple company, and we want people to know Apple, and then somebody's going over the app, and it reads Apple. Like it is kind of, we don't call Apple. We all know, even here in the yard, that it's called Apple, right? And so that's important. And so the way we fix that, we know that sometimes the written version of the name does not represent the phonetic version of it, and so we sometimes have to do some massaging to make it sound like it's supposed to sound. Okay? And so one way to do that is by literally giving it a completely different word. that's just going to sound like the way it's supposed to be. But if you put it in accessibility, it would not show in the UI. It would just go in the other one. Another way to do it is on paella. Yo, if you try to use this word in English, it does not say paella. It says like palela or something like that, right? One way to fix that, you can use the API to have an API attributed text string that uses phonetic punctuation to help the system announce the word correctly. So in this case, we're trying to use the word paella, right? And if the computer reads this, it's not going to say paella. So what we do is that we create an attributed string where we tell the attribute to say, well, the punctuation, the phonetic announcement is paella. And then with this kind of support, the app now says paella correct, right? Again, it takes a little work, but it's such a great experience. And you will not regret this in the long term, I promise. I wanted to do a live demo, and I know I'm out of time, but I'm going to take the last couple of minutes to show you a quick live demo. Some of these use cases that I found in this country that it's like, we should probably fix that, okay? So the first one, again, this is not a personal attack to anybody. This is us really trying to help. In fact, we have office hours in our office where we're asking people to come work with us, come do research with us, come write some code with us, come write some algorithm, bring your apps or something. And we're going to have a live series where we're going to be inviting people to help review some of the apps in the Dominican Republic. And we're going to give recommendations on how to fix them. Whether or not those people want to take them and improve on them, well, that's up to them. All right, so the first thing is, Altiz. I think Altiz is a very important app, right? Because like, I just want to say that, like, we all need to communicate, right? We all need to communicate. Without internet, we just kind of, WhatsApp works in internet. So if I cannot go to Altiz and pay my bill, then how can I even talk to people? I think communication is a fundamental right. And this is where I get upset. Altiz should understand that communication is a fundamental right. And if they're not supporting users to communicate, that kind of sucks. So this is Altiz, literally my name, the homepage. I'm going to activate voiceover, actually, voice control. And I have a quick trip. If you guys want to test whether you're getting the right labels, you can just use voice control and say, boom, show names. It will show you the accessibility label. A designer or an engineer to know whether the app is being supported carefully, you activate voice control and then just say, show names. Now, you see where it says me Altiz? Yeah, big problem. So if I remove that now and activate voiceover, in me. And you kind of have to like scroll next, Altis, and then it doesn't even say button. So like if I cannot see, how do I know this is even a button? And then the funny thing is like, portability link image. What does that mean? It is a button, right? And it's supposed to be one unit, but if I scroll next, it only reads half the actual word. So,
Alches. Cambiará. Alches. Cambiará.
I think that's supposed to be one word, but somehow it says it's two, and it's a label. It doesn't say it's a button. And this happens throughout the entire app, right? And I promise, yo sé que tú me vas a matar, pero give me one second.
Estamos sacrificando la comida, chilea.
So here is, I believe, the best app in this country. I genuinely believe it is Quick. Oh, I didn't even know. Might not be a good thing that I'm showing this. I'm sorry. Don't take it personal. But I'm being 100% honest. I did a study, and I know Arturo. Me and him, we met. We're great friends. And in fact, he actually got me my Quick account because it was impossible for me to open a bank account here, and he made it possible. But I told him my honest opinion, right? And so, the best app in the country, quick, but it's still quite not there yet. And so I'm just going to say that from a label perspective, very good job. So if I go, beautiful, amazing, they did their job. That's actually extremely, I never seen an app in this country that done this before. However, it is important that we go the whole way, not halfway there, right? And so if I go to now navigating, good. It skips to the bottom. I'm gonna show you one example. So now I can only interact with this phone this way. If I go to these right here, but wait, wait.
Degradado star 1347 disponible RD $sign 500,000.00.
Wait. That's not even the big problem. The big problem is accessibility. I think that seeing my history is important, and I think paying is important. I cannot do it right now. Both buttons are inside of this view, and there's no way for me to actually click on them. And if I tap on it, it doesn't do neither of the two buttons. It does some third action, right? And so imagine now if I'm blind trying to go through my history and my transactions and trying to get to pay, I cannot even pay somebody with Quick. And I think that is important. If the function of your app is to pay and use it, you're losing 1 in every 7 person not having the ability to create an account, okay? So that's who we are. That's Moneda. That's kind of like all we had today. If you're interested in hanging out with us, feel free to come by Spirit. Also, what I'll say is, stop mirroring. We genuinely believe we're solving all this problem in one app. And the great thing is we're offering this to all the other banks. I'm like, hey, if you want your users to have a better experience, they can still have your bank and you just integrate with us and it'll solve these problems. Feel free to, here's our link, my LinkedIn page, Hector Terrero on LinkedIn. Let's connect. I would love, again, people who are in the space in tech, UX, UI, software, you guys all know I've been reaching out. I create an event with you guys. We talk, and I learn from every one of you guys. So I'd love to connect with some of you guys. So let's connect. Our website is Somos Moneda, that app, because we're a community. And our app on Instagram is called Moneda app. And then let's try to get DR to be one of the best regions in Latin America with technology that is accessible for everybody. Thank you.